Let's talk about the next chapter in our Glucose Revolution book. So this is the exciting part because it's the actual application piece of what do I need to do, and then what's it going to do to my body for me to see the results that I want. So these are like the meat of the book. This is part 3. How can I flatten my glucose curves, right? How could I do this? How do I take all that we've learned and now actually apply it? So she shares a few hacks. This is hack 1, probably the weightiest hack that's going to make the most change. I, as always, am just going to read through what she writes because she says it so much better, and then we'll get a little bit of talking in between to make sure we understand what she's explained to everybody. But this is one of my favorite chapters. So we're going to talk about hack number 1, which is eating food in the right order. Did you know that there's an order to eat your food so that you get the best results? And she talks about one client kind of throughout the chapter to help you guys, honestly, I think just to be able to relate it to somebody in addition to just knowledge. So we're going to talk a lot about her client, Bernadette. She says that Bernadette told her that she lost 5 pounds in 9 days. And all I did was change the order in which I eat my food, which is what we're going to teach you right now. Keep in mind also, 5 pounds in 9 days is mostly water weight, which doesn't matter. Inflammation is just as good because that means we're eating things that our body can process, and in a way they can process so much better. So she says, so often we focus on what and what not to eat, but what about how to eat it? It turns out that how we eat our food has a powerful effect on our glucose curves. Remember, the glucose curves are what cause so many problems in our bodies because they come up and up and up, right? We get a spike because we've eaten something that has a lot of sugar, and then we get a crash, and we get so many symptoms from that, and our body doesn't respond well. So we want to minimize how high the spike is, keep it more like this, flatten the curves, and then a small drop off, and you're going to feel so much better. So 2 meals consisting of the same foods and therefore the same nutrients and the same calories can have vastly different impacts on our body depending on how we eat them. She says, I was taken aback when I read the scientific papers that prove this, notably one out of Cornell University in 2015, that if you eat the items of a meal containing starch, fiber, sugar, protein, and fat in a specific order, you reduce your overall glucose spike by 73%. As well as your insulin spike by 48%. This is true for anyone with or without diabetes. This is a huge deal. So what is the right order is the question, right? She says it's always fiber first, then protein and fat second, and then starches and sugars last. According to the researchers, the effect of this sequencing is comparable to the effects of diabetes medications that are prescribed to lower glucose spikes. We're just going to do it and how we adjust the order of the food we eat. A startling study from 2016 proved the finding even more definitively, with 2 groups with type 2 diabetes were given a standardized diet for 8 weeks and asked to either eat their food in the right order or eat it however they pleased. The groups who ate their food in the right order saw a significant reduction in their HbA1c levels, which means they started reversing their type 2 diabetes. Other groups that eating the exact same food and the number of calories, but in no particular order, didn't see improvement in their condition. Talk about a groundbreaking discovery. So the explanation for this surprising effect has to do with how our digestion system works. In order to visualize it, think of your stomach as a sink and your small intestine as the pipe below it. And this made so much sense to me, and I hope that it makes sense to you guys. So here's the picture. So just like she said, you've got the sink and you've got the pipe below it. So you've got your stomach, which is all here, and your intestine is the bottom half. Anything you eat lands in your sink. Then it flows through to your pipe where it is broken down, absorbed into your bloodstream. Every minute on average, about 3 calories worth of food trickles through from the sink to the pipe. And this is called gastric emptying. So if starches or sugars are the first thing to hit your stomach, they get to your small intestine very quickly, which honestly is most of what we eat. There they are broken down into glucose molecules, which then make it through to the bloodstream very quickly. That creates a glucose spike. The more carbs you eat and the quicker you eat them, the more forcibly the load of glucose appears, the bigger the glucose spike. Say you have both pasta and vegetables on your plate. You eat the pasta first, then the broccoli. The pasta, which is a starch, turns into a glucose as it is quickly digested. The broccoli then sits on top of the pasta and waits its turn to go through the pipe. However, consuming the veggies first and the carbs second significantly changes what happens. Begin by munching on the broccoli. Broccoli is a vegetable, and vegetables contain plenty of fiber. As we've seen, fiber isn't broken down into glucose by our digestive system. Instead, it goes through from sink to pipe to sewage slowly and unchanged. But that's not all. Fiber has 3 superpowers. First, it reduces the action of alpha amylase, the enzyme that breaks starch down into glucose molecules. Second, it slows down gastric emptying when fiber is present. Food trickles from the sink to the pipe more slowly. So when fiber is present from eaten first, it slows down everything that goes from the sink to the pipe. Think of it as like a strainer, and you've laced the strainer with food, broccoli or spinach, and then you have the carbs, that sugar come in on top of it. It takes longer to get through all that broccoli to get down the pipe. Whereas if there's no spinach or broccoli, that carb just goes whoosh, straight down so much faster. So it's almost like a strainer, if you will, to slow it down. Finally, it creates, this is kind of what I just said. It creates a viscous mesh in the small intestine. This mesh makes it harder for glucose to make it through to the bloodstream. Through these mechanisms, fiber slows down the breakdown and absorption of any glucose that lands in the sink after it. The result is that fiber flattens our glucose curves. So fiber eaten first will flatten the glucose curve because it basically creates a liner in the sink. So like I said, as the carb goes down, it takes a while to basically filter through all that, then go down the pipe. So here's our picture. So you've got this one here. So you can see first, carbs that are eaten first, they go straight down. If you have broccoli or spinach or some sort of fiber, then that comes in second, right? Here's our next picture. So here you've got carbs eaten first. Well, that's the same picture I just showed you. And then broccoli or spinach at top, your fiber. Or veggies eaten first, slowly dropping down. And then it holds are the carbs on top so that the carbs can't just go straight through. So eating veggies first and carbs second greatly slows down the speed at which glucose makes it to the bloodstream, thereby flattening the glucose spike associated with that meal. So let's see, there's another picture. Any starch or sugar that we eat after fiber will have a reduced effect on our body with the same pleasure from eating it, but with fewer consequences. That's carbs and vegetables. Now enter protein and fat. Protein is found in meat, fish, eggs, dairy, nuts, beans, and legumes. Foods that contain protein often contain fat also, and fat is also found on its own in foods such as butter, oil, and avocado. Incidentally, there are good and bad fats, and the bad fat that we should avoid is found in hydrogenated and refined cooking oils made from rapeseed, corn, cottonseed, soybeans, safflower, sunflower, and grapeseed. Foods containing fat also slow down gastric emptying, so eating them before rather than after our carbs also helps flatten our glucose curves. The takeaway, eating carbs after everything else is the best move. So regardless if it's fats, if it's proteins, we want the fiber first, carbs last. So here's another picture. She shows, these are the spikes. So here you have pasta first, broccoli second. So pasta first, broccoli second. See how high that spike goes? It goes all the way up. There's no flat. It just crashes all the way back down. Versus broccoli first, pasta second. So see how the spike is much shorter and it's a slower release down instead of a huge spike up and then a massive crash back down. Then she just shows this one again. So on this, you've got your veggies first, right? The fiber, they trickle down super slow so that it's into your bloodstream at a very good slow rate. So there's veggies, and then protein and fat is on top of it, which will still slow it all down. And then carbs fill the last of the stomach at the very, very, very top. To illustrate the effect of food order on glucose spikes, return to the Tetris analogy. I don't know if you remember that one from a couple chapters ago. Blocks coming down slowly are easier to rearrange than blocks coming down quickly. When we eat foods in the right order, veggies first, protein and fat second, carbs last, not only do we slow down the speed of the blocks, we even cut down on the quantity of blocks, thanks to the mesh that fiber adds to our intestine. The slower the trickling of glucose into our bloodstream, the flatter our glucose curves and the better we feel. We can eat exactly the same thing and the same amount, but by eating carbs last, we make a big difference in our physical and mental well-being. What's more, when we eat foods in the right order, our pancreas produces less insulin, and as I explained in part 2, less insulin helps us return to fat-burning mode more quickly, the results of which include losing weight. And so often, I know that's the goal. I'm doing this and this and this, but I still can't lose body fat. And so that's why this has really been helpful as I've introduced it to certain clients of, again, serving sizes matter. We want it nutrient dense food, but also the order that we eat. So I challenge you to try this and see if you see a difference. So she wants to tell us a little bit more about Bernadette. Bernadette, by the way, does not have diabetes. She's been using this hack, not because she wanted to lose weight, even though her girlfriends had warned her that postmenopausal pounds were impossible to shed, simply because she wanted to feel better. Her attempt at weight loss had come to a halt a few years back. She was sick and tired of counting calories. She had tried intermittent fasting, but it hadn't worked for her. Now at age 57, what bothered Bernadette the most was her poor energy level. Every afternoon, like clockwork, she'd get so tired while going about her daily activities that she would glance at the floor at work, the bank, or the coffee shop and just think, if only I could lie down there, I'd have a fabulous nap. To make it through the afternoon, she'd eat chocolate bars, but when it came to going to sleep at night, she suffered from insomnia, waking up around 4 every morning. Anyone relate to that? I have some of those thoughts myself. Bernadette first learned about glucose spikes on Glucose Goddess's Instagram account, who's our author here. She didn't know whether she was in fact experiencing spikes, but she decided to try the hack to see if this might help her. When she found herself in her kitchen the next day at lunchtime with the ingredients for her usual sandwich on her countertop, she recalled the veggies first, protein and fat second, and carbs last hack and thought, instead of stacking everything and eating the sandwich as one, I could eat the salad and pickle first, then I could eat the tuna and then the toasted bread. So she broke them up and ate them individually. She placed each on her own plate and ate her newly baptized deconstructed sandwich, because it's all torn apart. Bernadette is a creature of habit, and her go-to dinner is steak with veggies and pasta. So that day, she had the veggies and the meat first, and then they ate the pasta last. At no point did she change the quantity of food she was consuming, just the order in which she ate it. So she calls it deconstructing, so you don't eat everything all together. It's a little bit different, but if it's worth it, then that's awesome. The next day, to her great surprise, she woke up feeling rested for the first time in months. When she reached for her phone to check the time, she saw 7 a.m., hours later than when she usually opened her eyes. I know this sounds crazy. Bernadette thought it was crazy too, but she was thrilled. So she kept going, deconstructing her sandwiches and eating her pasta last in the evenings. So just like she said, she thought it was crazy, but I don't mind mixing these things up. If I feel better, I notice other changes happening, and if body fat loss is one of your goals, that this will help speed that up. So she shows 2 pictures: deconstruct a sandwich and eat the bread, which is the starch, last to dampen the glucose spike it creates and get rid of the 3 p.m. sleepiness that comes with your glucose levels when they plummet. So for instance, here you've got tuna sandwich right at the beginning, and then the glucose spike that follows. So everything in a normal sandwich pattern. And then here we've got it broken down with the tuna and then salad, then bread. So you've got the tuna and then salad all put together, your fiber and your meat, and then she just ate the bread last. So it shows how much smaller that glucose spike is, which leads to less of a crash at the end. Just let me know what you think of eating a sandwich pulled apart. After 3 days, her longings for mid-afternoon nap were gone. She was energized. She felt better that she had in years. When she went to the supermarket next, instead of stocking up on chocolate bars as she usually did, she didn't feel the need to buy any, and it was very freeing, she said. So what was going on, right? Before she changed the way she ate, Bernadette experienced the symptoms of a post-lunch glucose crash. She longed for a nap. Her brain sent a well-meaning but incorrect alert. We're low on energy, we need something to eat. She looked for a chocolate bar and promptly ate it. The chocolate bar caused her glucose levels to shoot right back up, after which they soon came falling right back down. It's a wild roller coaster ride. So when Bernadette changed the order of the food she ate, the spike it caused was smaller, so the drop was less pronounced. She felt less hungry and less tired in the afternoon, and the roller coaster ride came to a gentle stop. There's a scientific explanation for this improvement in our hunger. The Cornell research team showed that if we eat our food in the wrong order, starches and sugars first, ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone, returns to pre-meal levels just after 2 hours. If we eat our food in the right order, starches and sugars last, ghrelin stays suppressed for much longer. They didn't measure the past 3 hours, but looking at the trends, I think it is fair to say that it stays down for 5 to 6. Research also shows that in postmenopausal women, a diet with fewer glucose spikes is associated with lower incidence of insomnia. What's more, when we sleep better, we make better choices, and it's easier to find motivation to do good for ourselves. Bernadette felt that way. She even started going for walks in the afternoon. So it's these little changes that we're able to make. Even if there's no veggies on our plate, deconstructing our meals and eating carbs last helps our body. We significantly flatten the glucose curve and reduce the likelihood of weight gain, cravings, lethargy, and harmful long-term side effects of elevated glucose levels. So that's important. Even if there's no veggies on our plate, still taking apart or deconstructing our meals and eating the carbs last will help your body. Why? because significantly flattening the glucose curve will reduce the likelihood of weight gain, cravings, lethargy, and harmful long-term side effects of elevated glucose levels. So here she's got a rice and salmon meal that's mixed. So you see how the spike goes up, stays for a while, and then crashes. Here it's salmon first, rice second. So here she's got all the salmon on the plate and then the rice last, and see the difference in that spike, how small it is, and there's not a crash afterwards. And the cool thing is, if you guys ever get one of those, I had it on my arm for a little while. It's like a little teeny needle that pops in you, and then you wear the monitor. I think they're 2 weeks at a time I wore them. And every single thing you eat, you'll enter into an app, and then everything is timed on an app. So like, if I eat a chocolate chip cookie, I enter it in the app at 2:15, and then I can look on the app a little while later and it will show me my glucose spikes. So this is like really, like, she has these in graphs, but I did it. Anyone can do it. You just have to pay for the service, and you'll see how the foods impact you. And it was interesting, the foods that I thought would give me a huge spike and crash, some of them didn't and others did. And as I read this, I was able to look at everything else I ate and logged around then, and there was a difference in flattening it. So it's, I don't know, I'm the nerd though. I like to know what things are doing to my body when I eat them. It is not just about how much you eat, calories in and out, as I'm always saying. It's what are you eating, because everything you put in your mouth does something. And so hopefully this is very helpful. So she says, Bernadette says, 9 days into what felt like the easiest lifestyle change she'd ever tried, her jeans started feeling a little bit looser. To her surprise, she was down 5 pounds in just over a week. She lost almost a third of the weight she put on since menopause without even trying. Again, water weight and some body fat. So here's another example. Eating the potato first led to the biggest spike. Mixing it with the meat together was better, but starting with the meat and saving the carbs for last was best for glucose levels. So let's compare these. So you've got potato, then beef. So potato and then beef, right? It's a high with a crash. And then you've got mixed. So instead of potato, then beef, now you've got mixed on one plate, and it's not quite as high or high of a crash, but beef, then potato, look how small. So it's just the order, right? From potato, your starch, then the beef, and then it's a little bit better mixed, but it's even better if you do them separately after, which I'd like to take a bite of my steak and then add a bite of something else. Like, I'm one that combines my food, and I always eat my carbs first. I don't know why, because they're yummy, and that's what I like. So this has changed everything that I do. So remember, in the cockpit of our body, getting our glucose lever into the right position is the most powerful thing we can do. The consequences are often surprising, such as unintended weight loss. And as you can see, it starts with something as easy as eating food in the right order. So here's a question that we get often. I thought fruit was supposed to be eaten alone, otherwise it rots in our stomach. I've heard that myth before. Have you guys? So a question she's often asked, and when she talks about this hack involving fruit. So she says, I categorize fruits in the sugars category because although they contain fiber, they are made up of mostly glucose, fructose, and sucrose, which are all sugars. Therefore, they should be eaten last. But people ask, doesn't eating fruit last cause it to rot in the stomach? The answer is no. So if that's a good question, because it's like, well, fruit has fiber. Also, what do we do? So this is answering that question. You still treat it as a sugar. This false belief seems to date back to the Renaissance, around the same time the printing press was invented. Some doctors at the time recommended that you should never finish a meal with raw fruit because it could float on top of the contents of the stomach and eventually putrefy, sending noxious vapors into the brain and disrupting the entire bodily system. What? As it turns out, there's no evidence supporting this. Not surprising. Rotting happens when bacteria lodges on food and start digesting what food to fuel their own growth. So it's a bacterial thing. The white and green specks you see on a strawberry you've left too long in the fridge are bacteria growing. First off, rotting takes days or weeks to happen. It can't happen in a few hours, which is about how long it takes the fruit to be digested. Second, our stomach is an acidic environment, pH of 1 to 2, and any environment with a pH below 4 prevents bacterial overgrowth and therefore rotting. So see how that debunks that. Nothing can rot in the stomach, and in fact, the stomach, together with the esophagus, is the place where the fewest bacteria in our entire digestive tract are found. So those Renaissance physicians didn't have it right, but there are many instances of cultures throughout history that have embraced the right food order. In Roman times, a meal generally started with eggs and ended with fruit. During the Middle Ages in Europe, banquets usually ended with fruit to close up digestion. Today, people in most countries and meals end on a sweet note, which is dessert. To be fair, maybe the doctors of the 1300s were not completely off the wall when they recommended that you eat fruit alone. A handful of people have shared with me that they have to eat fruit on its own, otherwise they experience discomfort such as bloating or gas. It all comes back to listening to our body. Starches and sugars last are the right way to go unless we personally feel that it doesn't agree with us. Always listen to your body, right? So, a couple questions. How quickly can I eat the foods one after the other? Many different timings were studied in clinical settings. 0 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, they all seem to work. As long as you eat starch and sugars last, even if it's without stopping, you will flatten your glucose curve. During my meals, I just eat one food group right after the other, and so does Bernadette. Next question, what if there aren't any starches or sugars in the meal at all? Naturally, a meal with no starches or sugars will lead to only a very moderate glucose spike. Some protein turns to glucose as well, but at a much lower rate than carbohydrates. However, it is still beneficial to start with the veggies and have protein and fats second. Do I have to do this all the time? It's up to you to use all the hacks in this book in a way that makes sense for you. In my own life, I eat foods in the right order when it's easy. If I'm eating a dish such as curry or I can't pronounce that, where veggies, proteins, fats, and carbs are mixed together and it's difficult to separate the ingredients, I don't stress about it. I sometimes have a few bites of veggies first, then I eat the rest of the dish mixed. She's French, so I'm not sure what that French dish is. But the cool thing is she's realistic, and I love that because there's sometimes I can't take my food apart, like a casserole, especially with kids. And so she just says, right, be smart about it. And so this is what I do. I usually have a salad with every meal. And so before I have something that has a lot of ingredients where I can't pull it apart and it's the main dish, I'll have a little bit of lettuce before or a little bit of broccoli. I try to get a few bites of something that's a fiber and have that first, and then I do the whole rest of the meal. The most important thing to remember is that it's best to eat starches and sugars as late in the meal as possible. And remember to celebrate the small changes. If you eat your veggies first, then mix starches with your protein and fat, that's still an improvement and is better than eating the veggies last. So again, small little things. Whenever feasible, as a recap, whenever feasible and doesn't turn your meal into a complicated ordeal involving painstakingly separating the elements of this chef's special, it's best to eat anything that turns into glucose last. Start with the veggies and the greens on your plate, and then fat and protein, and then starches and sugars. It's tempting to go straight for the carbs when you're hungry, especially bread. They serve bread at like every restaurant when you first start eating. But if you use this hack, your cravings will be curbed later on. This includes drinks also, soda, wine, anything that has any sort of sugar in it. Based on the science, I love any meal that starts with a salad. Unfortunately, many dining experiences don't set us up for that success. Restaurants serve bread, we just mentioned that, while you're waiting for food. Starting with starch is the absolute opposite of what you ought to do. It will lead to a glucose spike that you won't be able to tame and then a crash later on, which will intensify your cravings. So now that I think of it, if I had to devise a way to get people to eat more at my restaurant, giving them bread first is exactly what I would do. Because then they're gonna want more food faster. So wherever you are, just do the best you can. When possible, eat your fiber first. Any of your vegetables. Like I said, salad a lot with most of my meals, and then I've got whatever steamed or baked vegetables that I've got, and it's going to be huge. Proteins and fat, doesn't matter in what order. Eat those next, and then anything that has sugar and carbs last. Think of how often we do certain things though that the carb is first, and I'm hoping you guys notice a difference in doing this for a little while. Also reset your system and your digestive tract, and then those curves will not go up as high and then as down as fast, that you feel better. So let me know if you try it and if you can eliminate some of those crashes, to include wanting to take a nap at 3 p.m., which is what I struggle with a lot.